welcome two new folks to join us as part of the Policy Roundtable. First, Eve Hendon, who's Executive Director for the Clinical Formulary at CVS Health. Eve, welcome. Nice to have you join an ICER meeting. I believe this is your first one, right?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for having me.
All right. Don't worry, it's not going to be bad. I'm going to ask hard questions, but there are no wrong answers. Believe me, it'll be fine. And Emily Shao, who is not a first timer to ICER meetings. Welcome back, Emily. There you are. You want to say hi? Come on.
Oh, yes. Glad to be back, Steve. Thank you.
There you are. And Emily is the clinical pharmacist. You're the lead. What's your official title? It's not clinical pharmacist, is it? I thought you were like the lead of or director of that process.
Yes, Steve, I lead the medical policies for drugs.
Right. So Emily, and Premera is, actually just go ahead, tell folks a little bit more about Premera. They may not know that insurer.
Yeah, absolutely. Premera Blue Cross is a regional insurer. We cover Washington and Alaska. We are primarily a commercial line of business, but we do have a little bit of Medicare as well. Roughly 2 million lives on the medical side, roughly 1 million lives on the pharmacy benefit.
Great. So again, lots of experience seeing situations like this, and we'll benefit from that. Before we move from this slide, I will just note we were pleased to have Alexion give a public comment about the report. We thought it was a shame that both they and Novartis opted not to participate on the Policy Roundtable. I think those of you who've been watching the entire meeting recognize that there are a lot of really interesting bigger picture issues, as well as, small, if you will, issues around data, et cetera. There's some important issues here around access, around innovation, pricing, and payment. And we wish that they had accepted our invitation to participate. We think that patients and clinicians and others always benefit when innovators, life science companies, are willing to do that. So we will make do without their input, but just wanted to note that, even though we are very pleased to have the 6 folks that we will now launch into. So you can take the slide down. And I'm going to start off in the way that we almost always do, because we have been talking a lot about clinical trial data. We've talked a fair amount now about the clinical scenarios. We'll get back to that. But if we did take a step back and we said, we asked ourselves, what would the health system have to do to get it right when we introduce a new treatment like iptacopan? Let's assume that danicopan is coming in. What do manufacturers, clinicians, payers, patient groups, what does the system, what does each stakeholder, what actions can they take to improve the health equity of the patients with PNH? What do we need to get it right? And as you think broadly about that, I'll just kick it off with one question that came up earlier, and it's probably more of a question for the payers to start with. But these are oral options in a landscape in which IV treatment has been really the background and the standard of care. So let's assume that these pills are covered, instead of being covered on what's called the medical benefit for patients, in which for many patients that means they have very limited or zero out-of-pocket requirement. Most people are familiar with the idea that if it's a pill, you have some kind of copay or co-insurance that can actually be quite high depending on the benefit design that your employer has chosen. And so we're talking about patients who are potentially either getting started on pills instead of IVs, or even switching to pills from IVs. And if we were trying to figure out how to do this in a way that advanced equity, how do we address the out-of-pocket part of this? What happens? How can people do that right? Emily, do you mind if I start with you?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. Speaking personally for us, on the medical benefits, so for the infusions, there's typically, it varies, of course, based on the employer group and how they set up their patient out-of-pocket considerations, but typically it's around 20%. So you can imagine with the cost of the treatments, in just to clarify, the 20% is for commercial line of business, but you can imagine with the cost of the treatments that you hit that out-of-pocket max pretty quickly. And so, you know, though the cost, out-of-pocket cost on the pharmacy benefit tends to be higher just across the board, the way the formularies are structured, you know, you see that same situation where they tend to hit that out-of-pocket max as well, besides going into the patient assistance that's available from both manufacturers.
So just to be clear, is it fair to say that it's equally bad, whether it's a pill or an IV at this point? Is that kind of what you're saying? You hit your out-of-pocket max, maybe even in the very first month, you know, either way, $3,000, $6,000, $10,000, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is that a world that sounds great for any? Nobody likes that idea, but I know that Jerry was saying that hadn't been her experience, at least with IVs on her private insurance or her Medicare.
Well, on Medicare, it's clearly an advantage to get an infusion. There's just no question about it. On the private insurance side, I'm not so sure. Again, I did make whatever my out-of-pocket cost was, $7,500 or $4,500. That was paid in the very first infusion, but I knew what it'd be and I knew it was controllable. And Alexion, the first 2 years even helped me with that. There was a foundation that helped pay for it. But this is a question. I just have to throw this out from a societal point of view. As I mentioned earlier, the amount of money, whether it's these pills, which would be even for me, and I'm financially stable enough, I could afford the pills if I was to go on the pills. How much can you pay for people? You know, I've been on this for 10 years and I feel incredibly guilty that society is paying to keep me, one person, alive, and you're all paying for it in your taxes and in the cost of your medical insurance. It's very humbling to have that. But yeah, it's clearly if you're on Medicare, you want to stay on an infusion because the pill prices are going to be outrageous no matter what. But that's not a good reason. That's not a good reason not to have the pills available, because there are people in rural conditions that they can't get to an infusion, or they still are physically able to work and they can't go every 2 weeks or every 8 weeks. So yeah, I'm not suggesting pills aren't right.
No, absolutely. And we're going to talk about that as part of health equity too, because of that very fact. I will have to say again,